On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks are 1-0 after a win over the Brooklyn Nets on Wednesday in the season opener. We'll get into all the good stuff, all the not so good stuff, and the bones of what became a nice victory for Atlanta, and all of that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1829 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening into Thursday. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. You can begin the season right now with a big return at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to tell you at the top of the podcast, as I always do here at Locked On Hawks, to make us your first listen each and every day. Check us out and subscribe to this podcast anywhere you find your podcasts. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube. Please like this video as you're watching it on YouTube and tell your friends about the podcast. And here we are, a real live basketball game to break down on a Wednesday into Thursday late night here. And the Hawks pick up a nice win at home, 120-116. They're now 1-0 on the season. It was not always perfect, but it was a victory. In some ways, it was never comfortable for the Hawks. In fact, neither team led by more than 10 points the entire game. There were two different skirmishes. There was an ejection. There were technical fouls. It was uneven all the way around. In fact, the Hawks were actually down by 4 points at halftime. They took control quickly in the third quarter, but it was never, again, comfortable until the very end. And even then, it wasn't actually that comfortable in the final seconds. Broadly speaking, Trae Young was very good in this game. Onyeka Okongwu had a career-best game. We'll talk about more as this game goes on. Dyson Daniels, I thought was really, really good. And kind of everything the Hawks are hoping that he will be in the future on defense and as a facilitator, all of those things. And all of that put together with a couple of other things that were big factors became a nice win for Atlanta. At the same time, you could argue the Hawks were favorites in this game, comfortably speaking. They were favorites by like 6.5, 7 points at FanDuel Sportsbook coming in. And you could say that they didn't live up to the billing there. And, you know, this is not a great Nets team, all that stuff. But I do think the vibes are pretty good after this game. Upbeat. The Hawks might have lost this game in previous years. They were kind of galvanized together, as we'll talk about later on, with kind of the skirmishes. Guys were responding, getting each other's backs. That was kind of the message after the game in some respects as well. And look, it is one game. And I would have stressed that either way. If the Hawks won, if the Hawks lost, if they lost by a lot, if they won by a lot, I would have told you at the end of the game on this podcast that it is one game. You don't want to overreact to that, and I'll try my best not to do that. You still want to provide context, but still, they win the game. There were some good indications, I would say, across the board in this spot, and generally a good vibes night for the Hawks, given the way that things ended, rather than that they had gone the other way on the scoreboard. So, all that said, we'll dive in now. If you're new to the podcast, what we do here on the show is like big picture stuff early in the show. Then later, we'll kind of zoom out. I'll give you my observations throughout the game, and then we'll talk about each and every player that participated in the game for the Hawks, rotation thoughts, takeaways, all that fun stuff. And at the end of the podcast, a brief look ahead to what is to come. But right now, we'll dive into the big picture in this game. And I would say the Hawks were not like necessarily dominant on offense or defense in this game, but they were pretty good on both ends to some extent. So defensively, I'll start there. It was pretty good on the whole, I think. They ended up with like a 111 defensive rating in this contest, even with the Nets shooting the ball very well from three, 17 of 43 in three-point range. And honestly, those numbers were even better until Cam Thomas hit back-to-back threes in the final like 10 seconds of this game to make it look a little bit closer than it probably actually was at the end. The Hawks created a lot of havoc in this game, which is mostly a good thing. They created 19 turnovers defensively. That was kind of the headliner on that end of the floor, only allowing 21 assists. That's very good. They had 12 steals. They had 9 block shots. It was a lot of havoc, which I think the Hawks, with their personnel this year in particular, can actually do sustainably. They also allowed only 40 points in the paint in this game, which is a very good number. Quinn did say after the game, Snyder did say post-game that they did not like execute perfectly. It was a very coach thing to say. And yeah, they were not great on defense, I would say, overall. But there were some big stops in this game when it was kind of in the balance in the last 6 minutes or so, 5 minutes or so. And the Hawks executed better in those moments. I would say the biggest issue defensively, other than Brooklyn making their threes at times, was the defensive rebounding. I will say it was much better after halftime. In the first half, though, the Hawks had lots of trouble closing possessions. And they ended up allowing 17 second chance points. I think 13 of those were the first half. It's an area to circle, to be sure. But beyond that, I think it was pretty good defensively, even with Cam Thomas getting hot late in this game and the Nets making a lot of threes. The Hawks did their job defensively and kind of held serve, even if they allowed a lot of points. It was kind of a fast-paced game. So a 111 defensive rating, the Hawks would take that throughout the year. On offense, I would say it was a mixed bag in this game. They ended up about a 116 or so offensive rating. That's about what they did last year. That would be like a top 12-ish unit on the whole. But crucially, that happened without the Hawks shooting very well from 3 or at the free throw line. So if you kind of normalize that, it would have been even better. They shot 58% on twos in this game. That is very good. Of course, part of that was the special night from Okongwu, who was 11 of 12 from the field. That isn't always sustainable, but still, that was obviously very helpful in this game. But the Hawks were 9 of 28 from 3. That's not enough attempts, in my opinion. I think Quinn would probably agree with me on that front. But here's the crazy thing on offense. They took 46 free throws in this game. Some of those were intentionally foul situations at the very end of the game, but still, that is the most free throws the Hawks have taken in a game since April of 2022. So it was 2 full seasons since the Hawks took this many free throws in a game. So that is a crazy figure. Not sustainable, but a lot of free throws, and that's a good sign in some respects. It means the Hawks were being aggressive, attacking the rim. That's a positive sign. Now, they actually did not shoot that well on those free throws. They missed 13 of them. They shot 72%. That's not terrible necessarily, but it's worse than you want it to be because the Hawks only have really on the roster one kind of bad free throw shooter, and it's Capella, and he didn't take any in this game. So it was everybody else. In fact, Jalen Johnson and Dyson Daniels combined to shoot 4 of 12 at the free throw line, and that was a big part of why the Hawks were a little bit closer than they wanted to be in this game. Ball security-wise, it was kind of just hit and miss along the way. I would say it was they did win the turnover battle in this game, but still too many giveaways, some carelessness at inopportune times. They did a pretty good job on the offensive glass, I thought, throughout this one, and they did win the points in the paint battle and the fast break points battle in this game. They ran a decent amount. They had a 21% transition rate in this game, which is actually quite good. They pushed the ball when they kind of could in this game. But I would also say, other than Trae Young and Okongwu, it was not particularly individually brilliant from anybody on offense. I thought Dyson was fine. There wasn't a ton from, Hunter was fine other than a couple of 4 shots. Jalen had some moments, but no one was dominant other than those 2 guys offensively. And they still, with that and with, again, bad free throw shooting and bad 3-point shooting, they were still able to kind of squeeze out some pretty good efficiency in this game. So I would say overall, my takeaway from this game is the Hawks did not play their best, but they played well enough, and underlying stuff was actually pretty encouraging. Individual player stuff, which we'll talk about later, but Okongwu doing what he did in this game, the Hawks adjusting to the style of play, something that Quinn talked about a lot in this one. It's going to sound funny given the way that the Hawks took so many free throws in this game, but the Hawks, actually, the referees let these guys play. There were many moments where I was sitting next to Kevin Chouinard of Hawks.com, and it was like, God, they're not calling anything here. It was kind of interesting, how physical the game got. It got chippy a lot in the second half, and the Hawks kept their cool. That was a big factor. I'm not always a big vibes guy. It's kind of, I want to give you the analysis about what I'm seeing on the court. But Dyson and Okongwu and even Ricochet and Trae and DeAndre Hunter, they were all, Capella, they were all kind of galvanizing in this game, and they feel like they're kind of just together right now, which is a good sign. Obviously, if you start losing, it can break apart. But for a game in which the Hawks did not play their best, I took away a pretty good feeling from this one on the whole, and especially, of course, it helps when you actually win that basketball game. All right, that is what I will say at the top of the podcast when it comes to big-time vibes and takeaways and stuff like that. But as we'll get into throughout this podcast, some observations, some rotation thoughts, some player-by-player evaluation stuff, and all of that's coming up in a second. But first, a word from our partners on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. This is a podcast about basketball, of course, but you've ever seen a hockey game live, you will not have to have me tell you that it is really awesome and entertaining. It brings a sensory experience to the table. And at Game Time, you can buy tickets for all kinds of sporting events, including, of course, hockey and basketball and football and baseball, et cetera, plus tickets for music, comedy, and theater. They have a feature there at Game Time called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets even easier for you and really more practical along the way. They take out all the fluff through a filter and only show you the incredible deals on great seats, so there's no wasting time with searches and searches and searches. For example, there are awesome deals right now on the Hawks game for Monday against Washington, including a pair of tickets that are available right now, including fees, $16 each at Game Time. That's an awesome deal, of course, and there's really more of that happening all the time at Game Time. My personal favorite feature at Game Time is the ability to turn on this feature We actually view seats through their all-in pricing, so there are no surprise fees at the end of the checkout screen. Also, the best possible price guaranteed at game time. Always helpful there. And you can take all the guesswork out of buying tickets right now with the folks at the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app right now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. One more time, create that account and use that promo code. It's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, so plenty to get to here with regard to observations and lineups and rotations and all that stuff. And we'll start at the beginning here with the starting lineup. Now, if you listen to the podcast regularly, you will know that I downplay the importance of that, but it does matter to people, and I understand that. And in the end, the starters were the ones that I thought were going to happen and what I said was going to probably happen on the show yesterday. It was Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, DeAndre Hunter, Jalen Johnson, and Clint Capella. And then, of course, there was outrage about either Ricochet and or Okongwu not starting. And I made this note on Twitter. I'll say it again now. A famous player, I would say Anthony Edwards is pretty famous, but the number one overall pick, Anthony Edwards, only 3 years ago, came off the bench for the first 17 games of his career as a top pick on a much worse team than Ricochet. Now, obviously, it's not necessarily one-to-one, but panicking about this is a little bit overstated. I think Ricochet is going to be better than the average rookie, but he's not definitely going to be the best player on the team or anything like that. Right now, he wasn't great in this game, for instance, but I wouldn't worry about that at all. Just want to say that out loud. And then, of course, the Okongwu Capella thing is notable. But at the same time, as a reminder, if you've just kind of found the Hawks again after a long break in the summer, Okongwu missed the entire summer with a toe issue. And he was not even cleared for the beginning of training camp. He only played in one preseason game. So he was not really fully ingratiated in the process. So back in the summer, I said, look, it would not surprise me if Okongwu kind of had the changing of a guard and finally started this year. That still could happen. But I also thought strongly that it was going to be Capella tonight because it just hasn't been that much of Okongwu coming in. Also, it might be matchup based. And we'll talk about this as the game goes along. But this is a game that was much more favored to Okongwu even before he was playing really well, and he was. But the Nets started small. They started without a center. It was not the greatest Capella matchup. And Quinn, I think, importantly talked about this throughout the game afterwards, that they're flexible at center. So, yes, I understand. I saw it coming a mile away. There'd be a lot of talk about starting lineup. It is what it is, but I told you what it was probably going to be. It ended up being that, and then we'll see if it pivots. Last year, of course, famously, Saddiq Bey started the opener ahead of Jalen Johnson. That was changed pretty quickly after that. So they're not married to anything here, but for now, it was the starters that I kind of expected them to be. Also, the Nets, again, played small. Nick Claxton is one of their best players, I think, and he did not start in this game and played 15 minutes. That was a little bit strange, so I don't know what was going on there, but that kind of dictated a little bit of the game flow. So at the outset, the Hawks actually scored 13 points on their first 5 possessions. It was 13-4 out of the gate. Hunter hit a 3, Capella got a steal, Dyson hit a 3, then Trae found Capella for a lob dunk, Dyson scored again, and then Hunter scored again on a 3-point play. So it was a barrage out of the gate for Atlanta. Obviously, it was not always that comfortable throughout because they gave the lead back, but it was a good start for the Hawks objectively. They went at Ben Simmons, who was actually starting at center in some respects for the Nets in this game, but they did allow a 9-0 run. After the blazing start, the Hawks did not score for 8 times in a row down the court, which is obviously going to hurt you. On the bright side, obviously defensively, Dyson was great early and often in this one. Rotationally, obviously I love the starters in this game. Bogey was the first sub. No surprise there. He came in for Jalen with Hunter going to the 4. Okongwu then played for Capella, as you might imagine, and then Johnson came back in for Hunter quickly. So basically, spoiler alert, the Hawks only played 9 guys, and the 9th of them was Vit Krejci. The other 8 guys played 19 minutes or more, but there was no Larry Nance Jr. in this game. And Vit only played basically when Trae was off the court. So that was 2 of the questions that I asked last night. Was like, all right, how do they handle Nance? How do they handle the non-Trae minutes? And that was the answer in this game. They briefly played the Okongwu Hunter lineup that I don't like because it's just very small rebounding wise, and that did not happen very often. Also, I should note this. They did not keep the pattern that they did in the preseason of playing Jalen and Trae together and then removing them together. It was more of a stagger of those guys, which I actually agree with as a general principle because they kind of have to have Jalen out there for offensive creation when Trae sits. But anyway, we'll kind of get into that a little bit more often as the season goes along. But some of those questions are answered for one night because obviously they could on Friday they play the Hornets. You could see Larry Nance then. You could see something else. Like, they're not married to one thing, but now we have one data point, one game to sort of look at, and they played 9 guys and no Larry Nance because Okongwu and Capella were both healthy. Risa came in his normal spot, basically what I expect to happen. He actually hit a 3 on his first possession in the NBA, and then after that, I think it was one of his next 7 from the field. So it's kind of a weird night for Zach in some respects. Trae Young started slow as a scorer, did not take a shot for a while, and then actually didn't score till like 9.5 minutes in the game. But he had 6 assists in the first quarter, played well. A couple of nice connections from Jalen to Okongwu late in the first quarter. And then Trae had a couple of nice setups on 2-for-1s in this game, including one in the first quarter. Later on, Trae played the whole first quarter, which is notable to me. Now, that was not the plan, I don't think. In fact, they had beat at the table with like 2.5 minutes left in the first quarter, but there was no stoppage, so he actually just sat back down. In the second half, it was Trae out a little bit earlier, and he kind of had 2 very small rests after halftime. The first stint without Trae was not great. It was Veet, Bogey, Risa Shea, Jalen, and Okongwu for a while. Then there was a change after that to go back to Dyson for Bogey. But the first 3.5 minutes without Trae on the court, the Hawks were -10. That is, of course, the fear. Dating back to the pre-DeJounte days, the Hawks were always bad when Trae sat. In this game, it was only Stark in that run. Overall, Trae was +12, and they were -8 without him. But after that first 3 minutes, it was okay. But the disaster areas have to be addressed, of course. It's a question. Actually, this time around, it was the defense that kind of cratered without Trae on the court. Not because of Trae, but Okongwu, who was great in this game, actually, I think made 2 or 3 mistakes in a row defensively in that stretch. He looked tired, which was not a shot at him. I said this during the game. He has not played a lot of basketball like this, so have him play 29 minutes. Like, he looked really gassed at times in the first half, which is okay. He played hard still, but that was part of it. And then offensively, Bogey did not play well, which kind of hurts them. It'll be tough for the Hawks to sustain offense with Trae off the court if Bogey's not very good, and he wasn't in this game. But anyway, it was a little bit of a hiccup along the way. Risa Shea did flash a couple times, took a nice aggressive step back 3 that he actually didn't make, but I actually like that he took it in this game. They kind of struggled at the end of the half, a couple of failed lobs, one to Clint, one to Jalen. Jalen missed a free throw at the end of the half, and the Hawks actually were down by 4 at halftime. I mentioned this before, that they scored 13 points on their first 5 possessions of this game. After that, in the second half, they scored 38 points on the next 44 possessions. That's about a 86 offensive rating, which is terrible. 1 of 10 from Bogey and Risa Shea in the first half is part of that. And the Hawks couldn't make a 3 before halftime. I mentioned this before, but the Hawks also really struggled defensively on the glass, which definitely hurt them in the first half. It got better as the game went along, but that was a problem area. After halftime, it was a little bit shaky. They were done by 8, actually, early in the third quarter. And then from that point forward, it was an 8-0 run. It was kind of close nip and tuck for the most part in the third quarter. They actually made some shots. Bogey made a couple shots finally. Rotation-wise, is almost exactly the same in both halves. Trae had 1 shorter stint on the bench in the first half, where it was 2 shorter stints in the second half, but that was kind of the only change. The non-Trae minutes were much better after halftime. It didn't have the greatest end of quarter in the third. They actually played this offensive first lineup of Trae, Bogey, Risa Shea, Jalen, and Okongwu, which offensively is fantastic, but defensively it was a little bit shaky, let's just say. But they were down by, they were actually tied at the end of the third quarter. In the fourth, they took control. There was all kinds of fireworks, we'll say. A couple of those were Jalen Johnson trying to dunk on people. He had one on Dennis Schroeder that was actually an attempted detonation that didn't really go in, but it was aggressive from Jalen, I would say. They tried to steal a break for Trae and Okongwu. So it was pretty clear to me, and I know Kevin sitting next to me, et cetera, that they were going to probably come back with Okongwu to close the game, which I immediately said was a good idea. And obviously, I'm known as the Capella defender, which I understand, but it was pretty obvious to me that it should have been Okongwu in this game. It was a better matchup for him. He was playing better, et cetera, et cetera. But like how you arrange that is always interesting. So Quinn said after the game, that was the plan. He actually went out of his way to praise Clint and Onyeka for how they handled it, how they communicate, how they are kind of the epitome of a good team together. That was interesting to hear from the podium after the game. But they sat Trae and Onyeka briefly in the fourth. It didn't go super well, but they kind of had to do that because they couldn't play them the entire rest of the game, probably, especially Okongwu, who hadn't played a lot in recent days. But they had a little bit of a hiccup out of the gate with that. They allowed a 3 right away, but they stabilized it. They were able to get those guys back in the game, and that was a huge point in the game to not get the lead away when they were on the bench. Then there was the big fireworks, let's just say again. Dyson took a clothesline foul by Nick Claxton, and he got up and was right in Nick Claxton's face immediately behind the stanchion of the basket. Fortunately, Dyson did not do anything to lose his mind and get thrown out of the game, but Claxton was ejected. After a review, it was a flagrant 2. It was the correct call. It should have been ejection. It just was not necessary. Dyson did not enjoy that, nor did anybody else. He missed the free throws to actually score the next possession after that, but literally 30 seconds later or so, another dust-up happened where Cam Thomas fouled Hunter in transition. That foul was not nearly as bad because it just came right after the other one. There was a lot of attention paid to it. Okongwu and Thomas were going at each other after the game, after that foul was over. Quinn actually had to pull Okongwu out of the mix. There was a double technical foul actually assessed. Okongwu said post-game, and I should have checked this, I forgot. Okongwu said it was actually his first technical foul ever, he said, in the NBA, which costs money, and they were joking about that. He was going to pay all that stuff. But anyway, no technical fouls beyond that, no flagrant foul, I should say, on Brooklyn. But there was just a lot of weirdness for a minute in this game. It got chippy, let's say, in the fourth quarter. But in the middle of all of that, it was a 9-2 run by the Hawks to go up by 10. So they were kind of taking control of the game at that point. They actually had the ball up 9 with 4:20 to go. Then they had a couple of bad turnovers. One by Jalen that was one by Jalen that was bad. One by Dyson Hunter that was bad. Just a little bit of shakiness there. Then Thomas made some big shots. I thought he was brutal in the first 2 quarters, but was better after that. After a timeout, the Hawks closed with Trae, Dyson, Hunter, Johnson, and Okongwu. I think Bogey will close a lot of nights, but he was not very good in this game. And they went defense with Hunter, who actually was playing pretty well, I thought, in the second half. And then again, Okongwu was the right choice at center to close the game. So no huge surprises there. Without going play-by-play at the end of this game, because there was a lot to get to, it was never comfortable. It was always 4 or 6 and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Trae missed free throws, actually 2 of them in the final 2 minutes or so. They should have had this game won. Trae actually forced a turnover on Dennis Schroeder. They scored at the other end of the floor. It was kind of over. In fact, in my notes, I wrote this game is effectively over. They were up 8 points or whatever it was with 27 seconds left, up 8. But then they allowed 3 to Thomas. Jalen had a really bad turnover, and then another 3 to Thomas, and suddenly it was within 2 with 5 seconds left. Now, obviously, there's some dangerous possibilities there. If they had thrown the ball away or whatever, they got the ball to Trae. He got fouled. He made both, and that was the end of the game. But, man, it got tighter than it should have gotten at the end of the game, which Quinn certainly acknowledged. Execution-wise, there were a lot of positives. Defensively, I thought they were pretty good for large swaths of the fourth quarter. But then the very end was not great, and then the turnovers were kind of biting them. And in the end, I think in the second half, they had a bunch of turnovers. Jalen had 6 in this game. Not the best. But there's a lot of information there, I know. But my overall takeaway as far as the game flow is concerned is that the rotation was kind of what I expected, with the exception of maybe Nance playing or not. But everything else kind of made sense. They had Trae and Jalen separated for the most part. Ricochet was surrounded by quality lineups with him. When they had Vito on the court, they had other ball handlers, whether it was Bogey or Dyson or Jalen or a combination of the both. The center stuff made sense in this game. Okongwu was better, but Capella was fine when he played, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll leave it there for now. Talk about the player-by-player stuff, but it was never, ever, ever comfortable for the Hawks. And again, this game was basically within single digits the entire game. The Hawks did lead by 10 at one point, very briefly. Everything else was nip and tuck, and the Hawks got out of there with the victory. All right, one more time. Right now, we'll talk about our sponsors on today's podcast. Then we'll come back with a look at the player-by-player breakdowns in this game. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 10 million members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or pick less than 2 players and their stat projections on watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times the money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is also the best way to get out in the action in most sports and in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. At PrizePicks, they put their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. And when your picks hit, you actually get the money sent to you in as fast as 15 minutes. They also invented the flex play at PrizePicks, which means you can actually still cash out if your lineup is not perfect. You can double the money, even if one of your picks does not hit. You can spend your football weekends or basketball weekends, etc., at PrizePicks and know that basketball is already right here, right now. And it's a great time to go up right now and sign up with the folks at PrizePicks. immediately. Download the PrizePicks app right now today and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA. From there, we $50 instantly. $50 instantly when you play $5 at PrizePicks. That code is LOCKEDONNBA, and PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even actually have to win at all to receive the bonus. It's guaranteed for you. $50 instantly when you play $5. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, we'll dive in now to the player-by-player evaluations, and I will lead with this. It was not a surprise to me that guys like Garrison Matthews and David Roddy and Mo Gay did not appear in the game, with everybody healthy other than Kobe Buffkin. As a reminder, Buffkin was out in this game. The shoulder injury that we do not know anything else about at this point in time, keeping him out of the lineup. TBD on an update there. But Larry Nance not playing is curious. I'm not shocked by it by any means, but he is too good of a player in a vacuum to not play. The problem is he is mostly a center, and the Hawks have two guys, in Okongwu and Capella, who are ahead of him in the pecking order. So it was always an option to not play him, at least in this one game. And again, the Nets were kind of small. Maybe that led to kind of part of this decision. But it will be interesting to see how they handle this moving forward, because Larry Nance is, again, in my mind, too good to not play. It's just kind of a weird spot for everybody involved. And there we are. As for the guys who did play, Vit Krejci, 11 minutes, 3 points, 2 assists, had a rebound. He looked fine, but wasn't particularly aggressive. I want more from Vit as a ball handler when he plays, especially at point guard, as he's going to be doing right now without Kobe available. But I thought he was okay, just that he was on the court when Trae was not, and the numbers were not kind to him as a result of that. Zachary Richichet was not particularly awesome, but I'll say some more on that. 7 points on 8 shots. He was 1 of 4 on twos, 1 of 4 on threes, 2 of 4 at the line. Had a rebound, no assists, and I'm not bothered by this. So I said it before, but it's one game for everyone. So on the bright side, Okongwu, awesome. Trae, really good. Dyson, really good. Richichet wasn't great in this game. That's okay. Quinn talked about that after the game. He actually liked the way what he saw from Richichet. I think defensively, he was in the right spot more often than not. He'll shoot better than this. He won't always shoot the way he did the preseason either. That was great. So, I was not discouraged at all. He wasn't great, and it was okay. They went away from him a little bit in the second half, but I thought he looked fine. He just didn't make shots. More on that in the future. He didn't force himself into so on the same – it's kind of funny. The two guys that every Hawks fan – not every Hawks fan – most Hawks fans wanted to see starting right now are Richichet and Okongwu. One guy didn't play very well tonight in Richichet. The other one did. It could flip on Friday. It's just one of those things. You never want to overreact to one-game samples, especially for rookies. But it was maybe a small reminder to people that may have needed it that Richichet is still a 19-year-old rookie. And I always couch, I think he's going to be good as a rookie this year, but rookies are rookies, and they make mistakes and all that stuff, and he wasn't great in this game, but that's okay. I promise it's okay. On the other side of that, Okongwu was awesome. 28 points, a career high for Okongwu, 8 rebounds, 3 blocks in 28 minutes. He was 11 of 12 from the floor, which is, of course, fantastic, and then made all 6 of his free throws in this game. So offensively, he couldn't have played any better. I guess he had 2 turnovers. So that's the one thing you got to pick apart. But offensively, the finishing was there. I know when I talked to Glenn Willis on the podcast over the summer about Okongwu in deep dive 2-part fashion, we mentioned on that show, there's more room to grow for his offensive game. I always want to be more aggressive as a finisher. The hands are great. The finishing touch is great. That's all been there for Okongwu the whole time, but he was really, really aggressive in this game, which I really like to see. I will just say, small thing, defensively, he wasn't my favorite in this game. I think he had some moments that were really good, a couple of breakdowns too. I'm not worried about that at all. I think I trust his defense on the whole, but I thought he was really good. And obviously, he's one of the biggest stories, if not the biggest story, as an individual player with the career high and all that. But it was the right move to close with him. Everyone's always already asking me, is he going to start the next game? I don't know. I don't think so. But if that changes at some point, I won't be bothered by it. This is the first time, I said this a lot in the summer, where I would understand totally starting Okongwu. It wouldn't bother me at all. But it also doesn't bother me that they may not right away. If he plays like this every night, he'll play plenty. I promise you. Tonight, 28 minutes from Okongwu. No matter what happens, if they have Capella and Okongwu, neither of them is going to play 35 minutes a game, ever. It's going to be 28 and 20 or 26 and 22 or 24 and 24 or whatever it's going to be. So it's a little bit overblown, but he was great in this game, and that was the headline thing from this contest. Bogey was not great. So like I said before at the top, there were 2 or 3 guys that were really good. Everybody else was kind of mixed. Bogey was not good. In fact, I think he was probably the guy who I think played the worst compared to their normal baseline in this game. 8 points, 2 6 from the floor, all threes, 2 assists, 2 rebounds. He was better after halftime, but the first half was really kind of clunky. He's a little bit kind of out of sorts right now. I don't worry about Bogey really at all, but he didn't play a ton coming in, so that's why. But they're going to have him do more offensively when Trae sits, and I'm sure they know that. But just one game, we'll see. To the starters, Capella was not good, nor was he terrible. I would say 6 points, 7 rebounds, an assist, a steal, and a block for Clint in 20 minutes. It was a bad matchup for him, to be sure. The Nets without a center, like there was nowhere for him to go defensively. And in the first half, there was some clunky moments as a result of that, like guys with a head of steam. But he rebounded the ball okay. There was a couple of moments, I would say, in the first half. It wasn't just Clint either. Like Clint and Jalen, their 2 best rebounders by far, had some like bizarre, like no catches on rebounds, like for some reason. It was just one of those things. But I thought Clint was like not terrible, nor was he great. Like Okongwu was obviously much better in this game. That does not mean that that's going to be the case all the time, but he was okay. Jalen was not very good either. 11 points, did have 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, but has 6 turnovers. He was not efficient as a scorer, missed 5 free throws. Like he was just not very potent. I don't worry about this at all. He was great at preseason, so it is what it is. But he was aggressive. I'll give him that, which I actually was encouraged by. He was trying to finish over people and on people, which I like. But just a little bit maybe over-aggressive as a passer, a little bit just kind of skittish almost at times. And the turnovers were bad. So just settle in a little bit for Jalen. Defensively, some moments too, but not his best game. He'll have better ones in the future. DeAndre Hunter was actually okay. Actually, I thought he was pretty good in this game. He took a couple of bad long twos that I thought he got rid of, honestly, and he didn't in this game. But he did have 12 points, 6 rebounds, 2 steals, plus 10 in the game. Had 5 fouls. That was kind of why he didn't play a lot early in the game because he was in foul trouble. But he was only 1 of 6 on twos, but it was 2 of 4 from 3. Defensively, I thought he was pretty darn good at times. So if he just does this, obviously you want him to shoot a little bit better than he did tonight, but I thought he was good on the whole beyond that. Dyson was excellent. 15 points, 5 steals, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. He was 4 of 8 on twos, 2 of 4 on threes. Did miss free throws, but other than that, was really good. Actually, it's unfortunate because I thought he really, really, really dominated Cam Thomas for like 3 quarters. And it looks like Cam Thomas had this big game because he had a big 4th quarter. But if you watch this game in the first 2.5 quarters, Dyson was swallowing Cam Thomas up. And that is encouraging. Obviously, you can't stop a good scorer all the time. But Dyson is a legitimate defender. Quinn praised him pregame, praised him postgame. Trae praised him postgame. Everyone knows the deal here. He's a culture changer defensively for the Hawks. That was very evident. He had the skirmish, but he was right in the mix there. No back down. He's a young guy, but he plays maturely. I love what I saw from Dyson in this game, and more of that to come. And then Trae was just Trae, like 30 points, 12 assists, ho-hum. Like he was efficient in this game. 30 points on 24 shooting possessions is very, very good. 3 turnovers is really good for a guy with his usage, plus 12 in the game. Took, I think, 2 charges, played competent defense. Like the one thing he doesn't do still very well is like get over screens, but defensively, man, I think, if this is a ho-hum game for Trae and he rolls out of bed with 30 and 12, like he was not the lead story because it's kind of a ho-hum thing for him. Like obviously Kong was a bigger deal than he was. I think Dyson as the new guy got more attention too, but Trae was excellent. So there you have it. All right. That's all I have on the game today. Briefly, before we get out of here, I'll just say this. The Hawks play again on Friday at home against Charlotte. The Hornets actually beat the Hawks 3 times last year. The Hawks will be favored in that game, barring some weird injury stuff. Notably, Brandon Miller, who is the Hornets' second-year forward, who was really good last year as a rookie, left the game tonight for the Hornets, so we don't know what's going to happen there. But I don't know if I'm going to have a podcast between now and Friday. Just keep an eye on that. I did, if you missed it, by the way, 5 shows in about 2.5 days on the feed before today. So we're a little bit oversaturated at the moment, but it might have, if something weird happens, something big happens, I'll drop a show. But anyway, that's the next game on the agenda for the Hawks. It's a home game. 4 of the first 5 games for Atlanta this season are favorable matchups, and Friday is another one. Now, nothing is assured in the NBA. The Nets are not very good. This is a game that they could have lost for sure. Charlotte is coming in. The Hornets actually won tonight, which is interesting in itself. They beat the Rockets on the road in Houston. So the Hornets are not going to be bad, I don't think, this year necessarily. And they did that without Miller for most of the game. LaMelo had 34 points. So that's interesting, to say the least. Anyway, I won't preview that game now, but that's the next on the agenda. Please stay tuned because I'll have a podcast at the very latest after the game on Friday night, and I'll be in the building for that one. But yeah, lots of stuff. Obviously, I'm leaving some stuff on the cutting room floor here. Try not to go super duper long on a game podcast because it's the first game. Got to pace yourself a little bit. But generally speaking, I'll have between 25 and 35 minutes of post-game podcasts plus stuff in between that. So please subscribe to the show. If you have questions, always send them to me if you want to on Twitter/X at BT Rowland or at Locked On Hawks. Or if you want to follow my non-podcast work, it's at patreon.com/BT Rowland. Please subscribe on Apple, on Spotify, on YouTube. Leave comments there. Tell your friends about the podcast. It's going to be a fun season for the Hawks. I'm encouraged. I am intrigued. I'm excited to cover this team. So much more of that to come. If you missed anything from this week, a lot of it's still relevant. So listen to that stuff as well, coming in and subscribe and all that fun stuff. I appreciate all the support as always. Enjoy the rest of your evening if you're listening to this podcast late night on Wednesday into Thursday. If not, enjoy the rest of the week. And we'll see you at the very latest after the game on Friday.